She planted evidence on an innocent woman and watched her life crumble in real time. And she smiled. For 5 years, this crime boss's wife had terrorized everyone in her orbit. Nobody dared to challenge her. Nobody even looked her in the eye until the night a broke medical student with nothing left to lose became the one person her dangerous husband valued more than his own marriage. This is the story of how one woman's past act of mercy became her shield against a monster. Not with begging or tears, but with a debt that couldn't be paid. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll never forget that the most dangerous people aren't always the ones holding the gun. This is a story about survival. No, it's about something far more powerful than that. Stay with me. Let me tell you a story about loyalty, secrets, and what happens when a wolf remembers who saved him when he was bleeding. Welcome to Soul-Woven Stories. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your thoughts on the story and where you are watching from. In the heart of the city, there was a mansion called the Dragon's Palace. Not just any mansion, mind you. This was the kind of place where a single chandelier cost more than most people earn in a year. Gold leaf covered the crown molding. The marble floors were imported from Italy. Even the silence felt expensive. And in this world of blood money and whispered threats, there was one name that made everyone lower their eyes. Vivian Park. She was the wife of Kang Joon-Hyuk, a man whose empire was built on violence and fear. His network controlled everything from the docks to the diamond trade. But Vivian, she controlled something different. She controlled the staff. Every breath they took, every step they made, she watched like a hawk waiting for prey. The household lived in terror of Friday evenings at 7, when she would descend the grand staircase dressed like royalty, ready to destroy someone's day if they dared to exist wrong in her presence. The staff would literally hold their breath when she walked past. They'd seen what she could do. There was Min Jun, a young kitchen assistant saving money to bring his mother to the country, fired on the spot because steam from a pot briefly obscured her view of the garden. She didn't just get him fired. She called immigration on him while he packed his things. And according to those who were there, she smiled while she did it. That's the kind of person Vivian Park was. Now, into this world walked a woman named Naomi Carter. Naomi was 26 years old, and 6 months ago, her life had taken a turn she never saw coming. She'd been in her final year of medical school, working night shifts at a trauma clinic, so close to her dream she could taste it. She was good at what she did, too. Keeping her hands steady when everyone else panicked, seeing patterns and symptoms that others missed, staying calm when blood painted the walls. But then her scholarship funding got cut. Budget reallocations, they said, and just like that, her future was on pause. So there she was, smoothing down the starched apron of a maid's uniform, trying to remember which room she was supposed to clean first, feeling like she'd fallen from the sky and landed in a gilded cage where one wrong move could cost her everything. The alarm on Naomi's phone buzzed at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before she'd actually set it. She was already awake. She'd been awake since 3:30, her mind cycling through the stages of cellular respiration for her biochemistry exam, the one she'd have to take online during her lunch break if Mrs. Park allowed her a lunch break at all. Her room was barely a room. More like a converted storage closet on the 3rd floor of the Dragon's Palace, tucked behind the laundry facility where the industrial washers hummed like sleeping giants. 8 feet by 6 feet. A twin mattress on the floor. A lamp she'd bought at a thrift store. Her medical textbooks stacked against the wall like a small fortress, their spines cracked and highlighted within an inch of their lives. On top of the stack sat her most prized possession, a photograph in a cheap frame. Her and her grandmother on graduation day from the nursing program at City College. Before the deployment. Before everything got complicated. She splashed cold water on her face from the small sink in the corner and tied her hair back tight, the way she used to before 12-hour shifts at the field hospital in Kandahar. Some habits you never lose. The muscle memory of preparing for a war you hope won't come but know probably will. By 5:15, she was downstairs in the kitchen, pulling on the black dress and white apron that made her invisible. That was the trick to surviving in a place like this. Be invisible. Be efficient. Never give them a reason to notice you, because when they noticed you, bad things happened. She'd learned that in the first week when she'd accidentally made eye contact with Vivian during breakfast service. The woman had dumped an entire pot of coffee on the floor and made Naomi clean it with a hand towel while guests watched. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, a small Vietnamese woman who'd worked for the Kang family for 15 years, handed her the morning checklist without a word. Master bedroom. Guest suites. The second floor sitting room. Mr. Kang's private study, but only if he wasn't in there. Never enter if he's in there. Naomi took the list and nodded. She'd been here 6 months now, and in that time, she'd perfected the art of being a ghost. Up before dawn. Asleep after midnight, medical journals propped against her knees, highlighter in hand, fighting to stay awake long enough to finish one more chapter. Her professors from medical school probably thought she'd given up. Dropped out. Disappeared into whatever statistical category held dreams that died from lack of money. But they didn't know her. Didn't know that she'd once held a soldier's intestines inside his body with her bare hands for 40 minutes while waiting for a medevac. Didn't know she'd learned to function on 3 hours of sleep and pure stubbornness. She was tired. God, she was so tired. But tired wasn't the same as defeated. Not even close. Vivian Park woke up at 10:30 a.m. in a bed that cost more than a luxury sedan, feeling like the world owed her an apology. The sheets were Egyptian cotton. The mattress was custom-made in Sweden. The view from her window overlooked gardens that required a team of 6 people to maintain. And still, somehow, she was miserable. She pressed the call button on her nightstand 3 times. Sharp, irritated jabs. Within 90 seconds, a young maid named Su Min appeared at the door, slightly out of breath. "You're late," Vivian said, even though she wasn't. "I want my breakfast." The usual. "And tell chef if the eggs are even slightly overcooked, I'm docking his pay." Su Min bowed and disappeared. Vivian stretched like a cat and examined herself in the full-length mirror across from the bed. She was beautiful, and she knew it. Objectively, mathematically beautiful. High cheekbones. Perfect skin maintained by treatments that cost thousands per session. A body sculpted by personal trainers and surgeons who knew better than to leave evidence of their work. She'd been a model once, before she married Joon-Hyuk. Before she became Mrs. Kang and traded runways for charity galas and the kind of power that came from being attached to a dangerous man. But here was the problem with marrying a dangerous man. Dangerous men don't perform. They don't shower you with attention or write you love letters or care when you get your hair done. Joon-Hyuk treated her like an expensive piece of furniture. Beautiful to look at. Useful for certain occasions. But ultimately, just another asset in his portfolio. Last night, she'd worn a dress that cost $12,000. She'd had her makeup done by an artist who flew in from Seoul. And when she'd walked into his study to show him before the dinner party, he'd looked up from his papers for exactly 3 seconds and said, "Fine," before returning to whatever bloody business occupied his mind. Fine. That's what 5 years of marriage had earned her. Fine. She descended the stairs at noon, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than Naomi's entire education, and began her daily ritual of finding fault. The foyer mirror had a smudge. The flowers in the entry hall were wilting, which was unacceptable because she'd specifically ordered fresh arrangements daily. Someone had left a window open in the drawing room, and now there was a slight chill. She snapped her fingers at Mrs. Chen. "Get that new girl. The tall one. The one who thinks she's better than everyone else." "Naomi, ma'am?" "I don't care what her name is. The sitting room needs to be re-cleaned. Everything. I want the books dusted. I want the windows spotless. I want the floor scrubbed by hand." Mrs. Chen hesitated. "Ma'am, she just cleaned that room yesterday." "It's..." Vivian's eyes went cold. "Are you questioning me?" "No, ma'am." "Then get her. Now." 3 weeks earlier, Naomi had knocked twice on the study door at 6 a.m., the way Mrs. Chen had taught her. 2 knocks. Wait 5 seconds. If no answer, enter quietly, clean quickly, leave like you were never there. The room was supposed to be empty. Mr. Kang was supposed to be away on business in Shanghai. That's what the schedule said. She pushed the door open and immediately smelled it. Blood. Copper and iron, unmistakable and thick in the air. Her training kicked in before her fear could. She'd smelled worse. Seen worse. Her hand found the light switch. Kang Joon-Hyuk sat slumped in the leather chair behind his mahogany desk, one hand pressed against his side, blood seeping between his fingers and soaking through his white shirt. His jacket was discarded on the floor. His face was pale, jaw clenched, dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that would have made most people run. Naomi didn't run. How bad? She asked, already moving toward him, her mind cataloging details. Blood loss, significant but not catastrophic. Breathing steady. Conscious and alert. Probable knife wound, mid-torso, left side. Joon-Hyuk stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. People didn't ask him questions. People didn't walk toward him when he was bleeding. People certainly didn't look at his wound with the clinical detachment of someone who'd seen this exact scenario 100 times before. I said, how bad? Naomi repeated, reaching him now. How long ago? Did it hit anything vital? 2 hours, he said, his voice rough. Rival family. They got lucky. You mean you got unlucky? She pulled his hand away from the wound, ignoring his instinctive flinch. The cut was deep, maybe 4 inches long, still bleeding but slower now. You need a hospital. No hospital. Then you need stitches. Do you have a first aid kit in here? He gestured with his chin toward a cabinet across the room. Naomi found it, pulled out supplies that were surprisingly well stocked. Medical grade. Someone in this house had planned for exactly this kind of emergency. She washed her hands in the small bar sink, pulled on gloves, and returned to him with the efficiency of someone who'd sutured wounds in the back of moving trucks while mortars fell outside. This will hurt, she said. I've had worse. She believed him. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic, threaded the needle, and began to work. Her hands didn't shake. They never shook. That was the thing about trauma medicine. You either learned to control the fear or the fear controlled you, and Naomi had stopped being afraid of blood a long time ago. Joon-Hyuk watched her work in silence. 15 stitches. Clean, tight, professional. When she finished and bandaged him, she stepped back and stripped off the gloves. Change the dressing twice a day. Watch for infection. If you get a fever, you need antibiotics. What's your name? Naomi. She gathered the supplies, washed her hands again, and walked toward the door. Wait, he said. She paused but didn't turn around. Thank you. Naomi left without responding. Without asking for money or favors or promises. She had a bathroom on the 2nd floor to clean, and she was already behind schedule. The changes started small. So small that Naomi didn't notice them at first. Mrs. Chen stopped assigning her the 3rd floor guest wing, the one with the marble statues that required 2 people to move for proper cleaning. Instead, Naomi got the library, the morning room, tasks that were time-consuming but not physically brutal. When she asked about it, Mrs. Chen just shrugged and said the rotation had changed. Then there was the incident with the supply closet. Naomi had been reaching for a box of cleaning solution on the top shelf when one of Joon-Hyuk's men, a tattooed enforcer named Han who usually looked through the staff like they were furniture, appeared beside her and lifted it down without a word. He set it at her feet and walked away before she could even say thank you. It was strange. Unsettling, even. But in a house full of criminals and secrets, strange was relative. Vivian noticed, though. Vivian noticed everything. She'd been standing in the hallway 3 days after the study incident when she saw her husband emerge from his office and pause. Just for a second. Just long enough to watch Naomi walk past carrying fresh linens, her posture straight, her expression neutral. Joon-Hyuk's eyes followed her. Not with desire, exactly. Something else. Something that looked almost like respect. That night, Vivian confronted him in their bedroom. She'd worn the silk nightgown he'd once said he liked, back when he still noticed things like that. She'd positioned herself by the window where the light caught her just right. "I want to fire the new maid," she said. "The tall one. Naomi." Joon-Hyuk didn't look up from his phone. "Why?" "She's incompetent. Slow. I don't like her attitude. Her work is fine. Mrs. Chen says she's the best we've had in years." Vivian felt something hot and ugly twist in her chest. "Since when do you care about the housekeeping staff?" Now he looked at her. Really looked at her, with those dark eyes that had once made her feel powerful and now just made her feel small. "Since when do you micromanage who mops the floors?" She wanted to scream. Wanted to throw something. Wanted to tell him that she saw the way he looked at that girl, the way his men treated her differently now, like she was under some kind of protection. But she couldn't say that. Couldn't admit that she'd been reduced to being jealous of a maid. Instead, she smiled. Sweet and poisonous. "You're right. I'm being silly. Forget I mentioned it." But she didn't forget. She watched. She saw Han carry boxes for Naomi. Saw Joon-Hyuk's driver offer her a ride home once when it was raining, something he'd never done for any other staff member. Saw the way her husband's expression softened, just slightly, when Naomi entered a room. Vivian had built her entire life on being the most important woman in any space she occupied. And now some broke medical school dropout in a maid's uniform was threatening that. No. Not threatening. Destroying it. She needed to eliminate the problem. Completely. Publicly. In a way that would remind everyone, including her husband, exactly who held the power in this house. The gala was in 2 weeks. Perfect timing. The dragon's palace had been transformed into something out of a fever dream. Every chandelier blazed with light. The marble floors gleamed like mirrors. Ice sculptures of dragons and phoenixes melted slowly on tables laden with caviar and champagne that cost more per bottle than Naomi made in a month. The guest list read like a criminal who's who. Heads of families from Seoul, Tokyo, Hong Kong. Politicians who smiled for cameras and took envelopes under tables. Businessmen whose companies had more blood on their balance sheets than ink. Naomi had been working since 4 a.m., preparing. Now, at 7:30 p.m., she was one of 6 staff members circulating through the ballroom in crisp uniforms, carrying trays of champagne flutes, refreshing drinks, being invisible. Her feet ached. Her back hurt. She had an exam due at midnight that she hadn't even started. But she kept her face neutral, her movements efficient, her eyes down. Vivian Park stood near the grand staircase in a powder blue gown that probably cost more than a car, dripping in diamonds. The centerpiece was a necklace that caught the light like a trapped star, each stone the size of a thumbnail, the kind of jewelry that had its own insurance policy and armed guards. She was holding court with the wives of 3 visiting crime bosses, laughing too loudly, gesturing too much, performing the role of gracious hostess while her eyes darted constantly to Joon-Hyuk across the room. He was in his element here. Dark suit, darker expression, surrounded by men who respected him because they feared him. He wasn't performing. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. Vivian watched him ignore her and felt the familiar rage building. She'd planned this gala for 3 months. She'd selected the menu, the flowers, the musicians. She'd orchestrated every detail to cement the Kang family's position at the top of the hierarchy. And he hadn't even told her she looked beautiful. She drained her champagne glass and grabbed another from a passing tray. Then another. The alcohol made the edges of her fury sharper, more focused. That's when she saw Naomi across the room, collecting empty glasses with mechanical precision. The maid who'd somehow gotten under her husband's skin. Who'd made Vivian invisible in her own house. The plan crystallized in her mind with perfect, terrible clarity. Vivian excused herself from her conversation and began moving through the crowd. She timed it perfectly, waiting until Naomi passed near the hallway leading to the powder room. Vivian approached from the side, pretended to catch her heel on her gown, and stumbled directly into Naomi. "Oh, God, I'm sorry," Vivian said loudly, gripping Naomi's arm to steady herself. Her other hand moved with practiced precision, slipping the diamond necklace from her own throat into the deep pocket of Naomi's apron. The whole thing took 3 seconds. Too much champagne. "Are you all right?" Naomi steadied her, confused. "Yes, ma'am." "Are you?" "I'm fine." "Excuse me." Vivian pulled away and continued toward the powder room, her heart racing with anticipation. She waited exactly 1 hour. Let the necklace settle deep in that pocket. Let Naomi forget the awkward encounter entirely. Then Vivian returned to the ballroom, touched her bare throat, and began to scream. The music stopped mid-note. A violinist's bow scraped awkwardly across the strings as the conductor froze, confused. 200 guests turned toward the commotion at the center of the ballroom where Vivian Park stood with one hand clutched to her throat, her face a perfect mask of horror and outrage. "My necklace," she gasped, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "It's gone. Someone stole my necklace." The ballroom, which had been warm with conversation and laughter, went cold. Heads turned. Whispers started. This wasn't just jewelry. This was a $2 million piece that had belonged to Joon-Hyuk's grandmother. This was an insult. A violation. In a room full of criminals, theft from the host was the worst possible offense. Vivian's eyes were wild, scanning the crowd like a predator. "Everyone stop. No one leaves. I want the staff searched. All of them. Right now." Mrs. Chen appeared at her elbow, her face pale. "Ma'am, I'm sure there's been a mistake. Perhaps it fell somewhere, or... Are you calling me a liar?" Vivian's voice cracked like a whip. "Search them. Every single one." The 6 staff members on duty were lined up against the wall like suspects in a police lineup. Naomi stood among them, her heart pounding, completely confused. She hadn't seen Vivian's necklace. Hadn't been anywhere near Vivian except for that brief moment when the woman had stumbled into her. Vivian walked down the line slowly, deliberately, making a show of examining each person. She paused at each staff member, checked their empty hands, peered at their uniforms. The guests watched in fascinated silence. This was better than any entertainment they'd planned. When Vivian reached Naomi, she stopped. Something shifted in her expression. Triumph, cold and vicious. "You," Vivian said quietly. Then louder, "You. I remember now. You bumped into me earlier. Near the hallway." "Ma'am, you bumped into me," Naomi said carefully. "You stumbled. I helped steady you." "How convenient." Vivian's hand shot out and grabbed Naomi's wrist, her manicured nails digging into skin. "Empty your pockets. Now." "I don't have." "I said empty them." Naomi's hands were shaking now. She reached into her apron pocket, the deep one on the right side, expecting to find nothing. Her fingers touched something cold. Hard. Impossibly heavy. No. No, no, no. She pulled out the diamond necklace. It caught the chandelier light and exploded into 1,000 tiny suns. The entire ballroom gasped. Naomi stared at it like it was a venomous snake, her mind racing, trying to understand how it had gotten there. When had it, the stumble? The stumble an hour ago. Vivian had planted it. "I didn't," Naomi started. The slap came so fast she didn't see it. Vivian's palm connected with her cheek hard enough to snap her head sideways. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom. "You disgusting thief," Vivian shrieked. "I knew you were trash the moment I hired you. Someone call the police. I want this woman arrested." The laughter started somewhere near the back of the ballroom. A politician Naomi had served champagne to earlier, a man with slick back hair and a Rolex that could fund a hospital. He chuckled, then his wife joined in, and suddenly the sound spread like fire through the crowd. Of course it was the help, someone said. A woman in emerald silk, her accent upper-class British. They always think they can get away with it. Did you really think you could steal from the Kang family? This from a Tokyo businessman, his tone dripping with contempt. Stupid girl. Naomi stood frozen, the necklace still in her hand, Vivian's grip still crushing her wrist. Her cheek burned where she'd been slapped. The room tilted and spun, 200 faces staring at her with expressions ranging from amusement to disgust to savage glee. They were enjoying this. A public execution, social instead of physical, but just as brutal. Look at her, a voice called out from the crowd. Probably thought she'd pawn it and run. These people, they come into our homes, we give them jobs, and this is how they repay us. The words got uglier. Someone used a slur, barely disguised as a cough. Someone else laughed at it. Naomi heard the word ghetto and welfare and phrases that made her stomach turn, words she'd heard before in different contexts but never quite so concentrated, so venomous, all directed at her like arrows. Vivian was playing to her audience now, her voice getting louder, more hysterical. I give you a job when no one else would hire you. I let you into my home. And you steal from me? You steal from us? She gestured to the crowd, including them in her performance. This is why you can't trust them. This is why you have to watch them every second. Naomi wanted to run. Wanted to disappear. Wanted to scream that she'd been framed, that she'd never stolen anything in her life, that she'd served her country and saved lives and earned her place in medical school through blood and sacrifice. But what was the point? Who would believe the maid over the wife of Kang Joon-Hyuk? Who would take her word against this room full of powerful people who'd already decided she was guilty? So she did the only thing she could do. She stood tall. Lifted her chin. Met Vivian's eyes with a steady gaze that refused to give the woman the satisfaction of seeing her break. She wouldn't beg. Wouldn't cry. If they were going to destroy her, they'd have to do it while she looked them in the eye. I didn't steal anything, she said quietly, her voice somehow steady despite the terror flooding through her. I was framed. Of course you'd say that, Vivian spat. They always lie. Someone call. Let her go. The voice cut through the ballroom like a knife through silk. Deep. Cold. Absolutely final. Everyone turned. Kang Joon-Hyuk was walking toward them, and the crowd parted like he was Moses and they were the Red Sea. Joon-Hyuk moved through the crowd with the kind of presence that made people instinctively step back. His face was unreadable, but something in his eyes was cold enough to frost the air. The guests who'd been laughing moments ago suddenly found their shoes very interesting. The ballroom went from circus to morgue in the space of 3 seconds. He stopped directly in front of Vivian and Naomi. His gaze dropped to where his wife's manicured nails were still digging into Naomi's wrist hard enough to leave marks. Red crescents. Future bruises already forming. He stared at that point of contact for a long moment, and Naomi felt Vivian's grip tighten involuntarily, nervous. Joon-Hyuk, Vivian started, her voice pitched high, performative. Look what this rat did. She stole my necklace. Your grandmother's necklace. I caught her red-handed. Everyone saw it. She. Let her go. Vivian blinked. What? I said let her go. His voice was quiet, but it carried. The kind of quiet that preceded violence. Everyone in that room knew that tone. Everyone in that room had heard stories about what happened to people who heard that tone and didn't listen. But she stole. Joon-Hyuk's hand moved with surgical precision. He gripped Vivian's wrist, not Naomi's, and applied pressure. Not enough to hurt, but enough to make his wife's hand open reflexively, releasing Naomi like she was something burning. Vivian stumbled back, shocked, staring at her husband like he'd slapped her instead. Naomi pulled her arm back, cradling her wrist, the necklace still clutched in her other hand. She didn't understand what was happening. Didn't understand why Kang Joon-Hyuk, a man who'd built an empire on brutality, was looking at her with something that almost resembled concern. Joon-Hyuk, what are you doing? Vivian's voice was shrill now, the confidence draining out of her. She's a thief. You saw it. Everyone saw it. He turned to face his wife fully. The room held its collective breath. Tell me something, Vivian. Where were you an hour ago? Around 8:30? I was. What does that have to? Answer the question. Vivian's eyes darted around the room, looking for support and finding none. I was here. Hosting. Talking to guests. You bumped into Naomi. Near the hallway to the powder room. I saw you. The color drained from Vivian's face. I stumbled. My heel caught. You touched her. His voice was flat, factual, devastating. You grabbed her arm. Your other hand went to her apron. He paused. And 30 minutes before that, I saw you remove your necklace in the east sitting room. You put it in your clutch. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Someone could have dropped a pin and it would have sounded like thunder. That's not, you're wrong, I would never. Vivian was babbling now, her perfect composure cracking like porcelain dropped on marble. Joon-Hyuk turned to address the room. My wife framed this woman. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. My wife framed this woman. The guests shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very aware they'd been laughing at an innocent person moments ago, suddenly very aware they'd aligned themselves with the wrong side of this particular power struggle. Vivian was shaking her head, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face, mascara running in black rivers. No. No, that's not true. She's lying. She seduced you. She. 3 weeks ago, Joon-Hyuk said, his voice cutting through her hysteria like a blade, I came home bleeding. A rival family ambushed me near the docks. The wound was deep. I could have died. He paused, let that sink in. This woman walked into my study, assessed the situation in 3 seconds, and saved my life. She didn't scream. Didn't run. Didn't ask for money or favors or protection. She stitched me up with hands that didn't shake, gave me medical instructions, and left to finish cleaning the bathrooms. Naomi felt 200 pairs of eyes swing back to her. She stood frozen, still holding the necklace, not understanding where this was going. Joon-Hyuk turned to his wife. The look he gave her could have frozen the sun. You want to know why I've been protecting her? Why my men carry her boxes? Why I told Mrs. Chen to give her lighter duties? He stepped closer to Vivian. Because I owe her my life. And in my world, that debt is worth more than gold. More than diamonds. His voice dropped to something quiet and terrible. More than you. Vivian made a sound like a wounded animal. You can't, I'm your wife. You are replaceable, Vivian. The words were delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut deep. She is not. He turned to Han, his head of security, who'd materialized from the crowd. Show them. Han pulled out a tablet, tapped it twice, and projected onto the blank wall behind the musician's stage. Security footage. Black and white but crystal clear. Vivian in the east sitting room, removing her necklace, placing it in her clutch. Vivian approaching Naomi in the hallway. The stumble that wasn't a stumble. The hand that slipped something into the apron pocket. All of it. Undeniable. The gasps were audible now. The politicians and crime bosses and their wives all saw it. Saw Vivian Park, socialite and hostess, frame a maid for sport. For jealousy. For entertainment. Get her out of my house, Joon-Hyuk said quietly. Pack her things. She has until morning. 2 security guards moved forward. Vivian began screaming, clawing at them, her beauty twisted into something ugly and desperate. You can't do this. I'm your wife. But she was already being dragged toward the exit, her voice fading into the hallway, the sound of her heels scraping against marble growing distant. Joon-Hyuk turned back to Naomi. The entire ballroom watched. Your tuition, he said. How much? Naomi's voice came out barely above a whisper. Sir, you don't have to. How much? 47,000. For the final year. It's paid. As of now. He gestured to Han, who nodded and began typing on his phone. And when you graduate, you'll work as this family's private physician. Not as a maid. As a doctor. With a salary that reflects your value. Naomi felt tears finally break free, not from humiliation but from relief so overwhelming it hurt. I don't know what to say. Joon-Hyuk's expression softened, just slightly. Just enough for her to see the man she'd stitched up in that study, the one who'd said thank you. You already saved my life once. Now I'm returning the favor. If this story of loyalty and justice moved you, leave a like to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss the next tale of power, secrets, and redemption. On the screen, I've picked 2 more stories where the underestimated become untouchable. Until next time, remember, some debts are worth more than diamonds.